Welcome back to the Balance Sheet, where we talk about all things in the world of women's wrestling. I am one of your co-hosts, King Ajar.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Billy.
And before we get started with a special episode this week, we are going to be giving you two episodes. The first one, which is right now, is going to be a review of AEW's WrestleMania, which is All In. They had two very prominent women's segments on the show, and we're going to talk about those in detail. And part two is going to be our full recap of Evolution, the WWE women's only pay per view that happens Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern from Atlanta. We will also have a special correspondent who was at the show live and will be able to give us a inside view in how the crowd was, who they were cheering for, who was over, which merchandise she saw in the crowd. So we're looking forward to that. But before we get started, I just want to thank everybody for continuing to improve our streaming numbers.
Yes.
We crossed the threshold where our episodes now average about 1,000 more streams than they did just 90 days ago. So thank you so much for that. We have crossed a subscriber milestone overall, which is tremendous. We're at 1,600 subscribers across all streaming platforms. That is Spotify, that is Apple, that is Amazon, that is Samsung, that is RSS. And that doesn't include our YouTube numbers. And I want to
Yep.
say that we really appreciate the 5-star comments, the comments about how great our episodes are. But even more important, please subscribe. That is really how you can help us grow our audience. So, with that being said, let's get right into All Elite Wrestling's WrestleMania, which is called
Yep.
All In from Dallas, Texas. I believe this is the Globe Life Field, which is where the Texas Rangers play. So,
Correct.
Billy, sir, I'm currently in my mom's apartment, my mom's condo here in Toronto, and you are in your home in Nashville, and you tweeted about this. You had an all-in watch party where
I
you
did.
invited folks over who are maybe lapsed wrestling fans, haven't watched in a while, are only WWE fans. So, what was your experience like throwing this party? What was the feedback you received from the folks in your house? I believe your father was there as well. Who
Yep.
watched? Who grew up on? Your father's a big Bruno Sammartino fan,
Yeah. Bob Backlund and
and
Bruno San Martino. Yeah.
Bob Bruno, uh, Stan Stasiak, Ivan Koloff. We're getting
Yep.
into the old school WWF. Before we get into, we're going to start with the women's title match and your review of it. What was your crowd like?
Yeah. No, it was all family. I have, my dad, brother-in-law, nephew, and then I have a cousin and an uncle who live out here too, and all of, you know, mom, sister, and aunt as well. So, we're pretty deep in the house, more people than we usually have over at the house. Uh, it was very interesting. So, my brother-in-law is a watches WWE Raw and SmackDown every week type of fan. Um, he's going to watch the PLEs and all that. My dad, like I said, is a lapsed wrestling fan, and then everyone else was kind of like casual and um, only partially aware of AEW. So the cool part was they came over, they sat down, they paid attention, and I really just enjoyed watching their um, reactions to everything. Uh, I'm gonna skip straight to the best part. So the men's casino gauntlet was first, and we watched that, and then a couple matches later, the women's casino gauntlet was on, and my dad, who has very, very, very little experience watching women's wrestling the way that it is today. I've had him watch Brooklyn. I showed him actually the Jamie and Mercedes match. That's probably the only two matches he's seen. Um, Halfway, maybe when Athena was out, maybe a little bit, 3/4 of the way through the casino gauntlet, he goes, you know, I totally get why you guys like to talk about women's wrestling on your podcast. The effort and care that they're putting into this match to me really outstrips what the men are trying to do. He's like, it feels really, really big to all the women in the ring. How important it is. Like they're all trying to prove themselves and not just kind of going through a match. I was like, yeah, that's 100%. I mean, they botch an opportunity, and it might not even just mean they're not on the next card. It might mean the women get less time on the next card, and so it was cool to see that perspective. They very much enjoyed Toni and Mercedes. Probably the TV attendance was at the best during Toni and Mercedes. Like people were in and out of the main room kind of watching. Everyone stayed glued for Toni Mercedes. We won't get too deep into it here because it's not our shtick, but not big fans of the main event and the guys getting stabbed in the head with forks. But I didn't expect them to enjoy that part of the show anyway. But no, it was cool. I think the biggest part of it is it didn't even cross my mind to have everyone over for All In last year. Like it didn't even cross, because I barely wanted to watch the whole show, if I'm being honest, and I think AEW did a really good job of building a card that felt like it was worth watching top to bottom. Their matches, their pay-per-view matches, they always go above all to deliver. But that doesn't mean you could have a casual audience watch it, right? You want there to be a video package that makes them understand why this guy hates that guy or this girl hates that girl. And I thought the stories were good enough to have everyone over, and overall everyone enjoyed themselves. Two things before I kick it back to you. I tweeted this. I think it was a huge day for women's wrestling in the world. You cannot tell me that that was not the most pro women's AEW crowd that they've ever had. Mercedes, Willow, Toni, Mariah, pretty much everyone who's been at the top, they often have to earn the crowd's respect through the first 5 to 10 minutes of the match. And that's something that we're not seeing on the WWE side. WWE side, the fans are very excited to see the women, and they're hot from Jump Street. I felt like yesterday's match, everyone was hot from Jump Street for both women's matches. Willow got one of the biggest pops of the night. Her pop destroyed every man in the Casino Gauntlet's pop, like easily. Toni and Mercedes had the best energy to start their match, certainly of anyone else up to that point. I know Omega Okada got a "This Is Awesome" before they started, but the crowd was a little tougher for anyone who watched it. But everyone was ready for Toni Mercedes. Everyone was loud. They were with the match the whole time. And so you had 29,000 people roughly, I think is what we're going to hear, 28, 29. And it was the most women's wrestling fans that have ever been at an AEW event I would be certain of. So I think that's just a huge win. And then I meant to say at the beginning, and then I'll pass it back to you, but on a somber note, just no tribalism here. Tough day yesterday. Adam Cole and Seth Rollins. We don't know the extent of how bad Seth Rollins is hurt, but just best wishes to both of those guys. Adam Cole looks like it's a concussion issue again, which he's dealt with a lot. So just really heart goes out to the guy. That was a tough moment. Seth, everyone was hoping it was a cash-in work, but it was not. He was supposed to win that match last night. So hopefully it's not as bad of an injury as it looked. But I'll just say, support your faves. Don't take them for granted. Don't get overly mad about booking decisions. If they're still wrestling, support them, because it's a tough business, man. You don't know when you're going to have never have their matches again, or have a year like we learned with Mercedes a couple years back, where we went a whole year without her matches. So
Yeah.
you caught up on the event this morning, correct?
I did. Well, so I ordered the pay-per-view from my phone on Amazon Prime, And I did it because I'm in Canada and it's actually cheaper for me to get it in Canadian dollars because of the currency rate. So I got it on my mom's Amazon Prime account. And I said, okay, I have it. I can always watch it now. I don't have to worry about trying to find it when I go home. I'll watch, at least I'll watch the women's gauntlet and I'll watch the Mercedes match. So yes, I did catch up on it last night before I went to bed. And then I watched it again today. And it was a long pay-per-view. I mean, it was 6 hours, and that's too much. Quite honestly, that's too much to ask of any fan, but at least they gave you an early start time. So you still got out at a decent time. That's good. So here's before I give you my review on the two events, obviously the Mercedes Tony match is what we're going to start with. I couldn't agree with what you said more about the tribalism stuff. Adam Cole has wanted to be a wrestler since he was 9 years old. Seth Rollins has wanted to be a wrestler, I think, since he's like 11. Both have given their all to the business. They have worked from Ring of Honor to Independence to NXT. Adam Cole never got to WWE main roster because he chose to go to AEW. That was his choice. At the time, he went obviously for other reasons besides wrestling. Now, maybe that opportunity isn't there for him anymore. Seth Rollins, every time it feels like he gets pushed to the top of the card, he has one of these injuries. Here's why nobody should ever, 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 ever complain about a wrestler making too much money. That's why. So
Yeah.
if you're Mercedes Moné, if you're Toni Storm, if you're Seth Rollins, if you're Adam Cole, if you're Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson, if you're Io, if you're Rhea, get as much money as you can. If and I love Stephanie McCord definitely more than most people who watch women's wrestling do. And I'm a huge fan of Blake, Monroe. But I do think taking less money to fulfill your dream, I don't know if that's wise, only because these companies see you as a commodity anyway, and you have a very short amount of time to make the most money that you can. And I would highly recommend these wrestlers to take the most money. Honestly, like I think thinking back, like I know Stephanie's been pushed to the moon and she'll be fine and she'll make her money in WWE. I'm not worried about her or Blake Monroe. But you're sending an anti-wrestler message by doing that. I know the late great Bruiser Brody was always about the dollar. He'd ask for $10,000, and if the promoter said no, he'd walk out and go to the next promoter. Like that's how he did business. He's like, I'm about money. I think all of the wrestlers should be out for their own interests or form and get a union and do it together. But
Yeah.
understand both of these companies are multi-billion-dollar corporations. And everybody talks about TKO. It was recently revealed in Forbes that the Khan Asset Management Group, which owns, a soccer team, an NFL team, AEW, they're about 13, $14 billion of assets. So they're not paupers either. So all of you
Right.
wrestlers get your money. Now let's get to one of the most highly anticipated women's matches ever,
Yep.
and probably the most highly anticipated AEW women's match ever.
Yep.
Mercedes Moné going after the AEW Women's World Championship from Timeless Toni Storm. Both women have not experienced a pinfall loss this year, so it felt like a real marquee event. The crowd was hot from the introductions. They were hot for Mercedes' entrance. They were hot for Toni Storm's entrance. The crowd was cheering them from the very beginning. They were into the match all the way through. This was not a Mercedes Chris situation where it took 5 to 7 minutes to get the crowd warmed up. They were cooking from Jump Street. Timeless Toni Storm is easily the most over woman the company has ever had, maybe the most over wrestler they've ever had. It's an honest conversation. Mercedes is starting to win over the hardcore AEW fans. with the amount of work she puts in the ring and the great performances that she has. The match was phenomenal. I mean, I don't have a bad thing to say about it. The women worked hard. They did some creative stuff. I liked how they used Luther. I liked how they incorporated their kind of promos back and forth into the match with, with obviously the kissing and that stuff. Um, I thought the match was great. Like I said, I would give the match, if you want to say it's a 5 out of 5, bravo. I am not going to argue with you. I personally would give it a 4.75. But I think it's up there with one of the 4 best Mercedes matches of all time. I would still have Brooklyn as number 1. I really think the Hazuki match is better. Me personally, for what I like to see, I love that match, and I really love the Chris matches, and I love the Jamie matches, and I love this match. Those would be my group. And it says a lot that I'm naming one WWE match of
Crazy,
6,
right?
right?
The first thing that came to my mind is like only one of those was Sasha Banks.
And here's the thing: if we're being honest with each other, and as a wrestling women's fandom, we all have the warm and fuzzies about Brooklyn. It's that match. It changed the dynamic. It made people wake up about women's wrestling in North America. It gets all the praise, and it should. But as an in-ring match, I could make the case that Mercedes and Bailey have had matches separate from each other that have been better in the ring, but it doesn't have the overall packaging. Now, back to this match. I'm going to be honest here. I thought they picked the wrong winner. I'm not going to have a freak out about it. I'm not going to lose my mind and say, oh, Mercedes. Like, I don't think she's being booked in AEW the way that the Vince McMahon WWE booked her, as this serial choker, where, Alexa Bliss can come out and cut a promo and say, yeah, when does Sasha Banks ever win a big match and then lose the next week? Like, I don't think she's going to be that for sure. But I didn't like the result, and I'll tell you why. Because when I watch a wrestling match, my brain goes like choose your own adventure books, where I start to think, okay, if Toni Storm wins, where is she going? And if Mercedes Moné wins, where do they go? And I really, really wanted to see a female version of the Roman Reigns character for AEW, which is this unbeatable force in Mercedes who, by hook or by crook, wins in these weird ways. But finally, when she loses, she cements that person. Willow, uh, Chris. Maybe it's Tony again. Maybe it's Suri. Maybe it's Athena. I don't know. I really thought that the result was the wrong one. Because now my question is, where does Tony go? She's beaten everybody. Okay, I know you told me this before we started recording, which I wasn't aware of. She hasn't beat Athena, and it's the one person that is probably gonna maybe beat her. Then my question is, okay, so Mercedes beats Athena, Athena beats Tony, Tony beats Mercedes. This is that weird I can beat you, you can't beat them, they can't beat me booking. I'm not the biggest fan of that. So to me, yes, it was a phenomenal match. And Timeless Tony Storm is Tony Khan's Undertaker. I was
Yes,
saving that one for when we recorded. I didn't say it before we recorded because I had it in my
it's a
pocket.
great analogy. Yeah.
She is his Undertaker. He has created this character that is going to be one of his indelible marks on professional wrestling. The way Vince McMahon created the character of the Undertaker, because Stone Cold is Steve Williams with the volume turned up. The Rock is Dwayne Johnson with the volume turned up. CM Punk, Cena. These are all themselves with volume turned up. The Undertaker is a real character. Timeless Tony Storm, like even the way they announce her from Warner Brothers Studio Stage 7, it's a complete character. And
Death
I
Valley,
do,
California. Yeah.
yeah, and I totally believe Tony Storm or Tony Khan when he looks at Toni Storm, he sees like his life's work as a wrestling fan. Like, this is a guy like myself, and I obviously I don't have the money he has, but I subscribed to the newsletters like he did. I read the dirt sheets like he did. I was a wrestling fan like he is. And I've always thought about, if I was a booker, what character would I create? And I think Tony Khan is just so enamored with his creation of Toni Storm that, quite honestly, I could see Toni Storm being his Undertaker, in the sense of, when it's all said and done, she has every accolade for AEW. She is clearly going to be seen as the best AEW women's wrestler of all time. Like, and here's the thing, she's younger than everybody else. So
Yeah.
he has a lot of runway with her. So I didn't like the decision personally. I still think Tony could have won the belt back in a part 2 or a part 3 match. I liked the direction with Mercedes winning, because it gives me like, ooh, who's gonna beat her? Who's gonna beat her? But I understand where Tony Khan is coming from. Toni Storm is his Undertaker, and he's gonna protect that character to the fullest, and he has done it so far, because even when she loses, she immediately gets her win back.
Yeah. No, it's a great analogy. I've kind of not, I made it a point to not argue with anyone and how they felt after the match, because everyone should feel how they feel. Some people are crestfallen about it, some are bummed, some totally get it. Some Mercedes fans think it's it makes more sense that Tony won. There are a couple of things that make me very comfortable with it. You look at all the women that Mercedes put over and catapulted. This is the first one that is actually several years younger than her. I've seen the thing where it was like Tony was made anyway. Kinda, yeah, kinda, but not made like this. And hear me out for a second. Her longest world title match before this, or singles match in AEW, was like 14 minutes and 52 seconds. It was the Hollywood ending. She just went 25 minutes with Mercedes, which was the longest match in women's AEW history. Mercedes has the 7 longest matches in AEW women's history. So, like, just like I don't get mad that she lost to Bayley, and I wasn't mad that she lost to Bianca, I do see it, especially through what you just said, through Tony Khan's eyes. Toni Storm is the main character. She's the good guy. And guys, Mercedes is the best heel probably in the world, and she's one of the greatest heel characters ever. Heels lose.
Yes.
Heels lose. Now, do I agree with you that if Tony Khan wanted to be gutsy and say, can I create a character that will take over the wrestling world, that will break through the bubble of wrestling and be on late night shows the way Roman Reigns was, and all that, that would have been the move to have Mercedes win. I think Toni Storm was the safe route. I think Toni Storm makes the AEW audience that shows up every week happy. I think Tony has enough chops and the character is good enough that it doesn't piss off Mercedes fans for the most part. We're women's wrestling fans love the match. They're going to tune in. So it was a very safe decision. The ballsier move, like the Shotzi Blackheart ballsy move, we'll call it, would have been Mercedes to win, because that would have been like throwing the line out there to see, I have X amount of people watching this match that don't usually watch my show. They don't watch Dynamite, and they don't even watch most of the pay-per-views. Do they come back to see who finally beats Mercedes Moné? I would have bet that they would have. So that's my take on the decision. The match was phenomenal.
Mhm.
I have it as a 5, a real 5. We don't have a above 5 scale on this particular podcast. Um, you know, Brooklyn is like Brooklyn's like your favorite coming of age movie. Like, think of like
Mhm.
a good coming of age teenage movie that's like your comfort movie and you watched when you were a teenager and you just love that movie and you could watch it over and over and over again. And you might say to someone, "Hey, that's my favorite movie." Um, it's but is it better than Shawshank Redemption? Probably not, but it's probably still your favorite movie, you know? I think the Hazuki match and the Toni match are great matches at a not just because Toni Storm is doing crazy stuff in the ring, like at a rated R adult level. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's not a movie for 13-year-olds. It's a movie for 21 and 25 and 30-year-olds, right? It's a mature movie. Um, so if you look at it that way, yeah, there are some matches that probably as matches have surpassed Brooklyn, but that's that warm and fuzzy feeling that we all get from that one. But um, I think it was absolutely the best AEW match in AEW women's history. Um, I am, you could yell at me in the comments if you want. I am always going to grade a match like Mercedes and Toni just had over what like Tony and Mariah did or Hangman and Moxley did. I don't particularly like seeing someone hung over the top rope with a chain. It's not my deal. Um, but it's a different genre. If we're talking movies, it's a different genre. So I thought Toni and Mercedes had the match of the night. Um, and just like she did at WrestleMania 37, um, just like she did at Brooklyn, and countless times throughout her career, just like she did with Jamie. I don't want everyone to lose sight of the Jamie match, the first women's match to ever kick off an AEW pay per view.
Mhm.
In the biggest moments, she shines the brightest. That's why both WWE and AEW and NJPW, those three,
Mhm.
she's the only woman who they have continually said, yeah, you can go out there and have as much time or more time than the men. She's the only one. She's the only one. She's got most of the longest matches in WWE history. She has all of the longest matches in um, AEW history. She has all the longest matches in NJPW mixed card histories, right? Like where the men are on the card. She's the only woman that they put in a match over the men's title on NJPW, and she's the one, man. She's the one, and um, so we're always proud of what she accomplishes, and proud of Toni because Toni again has been hitting grand slams all year with this character, and it truly was not to make a cop out. I didn't know who was going to win going in, and you can make a good argument for both. That's a perfectly booked match, feud.
I didn't know who was going to win after their face off on Wednesday.
Yeah,
I did wake up Saturday morning before I had to get on, when I messaged you and I said Tony's going to win. And I don't know what it was. Like I woke up Saturday and I'm like, Tony's going to win. And
yeah,
I think it goes back to just, I looked at it from Tony Khan's lens and nobody else's. Tony Storm is his masterpiece. And he's going to do everything he can to add to his masterpiece. Mercedes Moné was Mercedes Moné before she ever stepped foot into AEW.
yep,
She main evented WrestleMania. She main evented an NXT pay-per-view. She main evented a WWE pay-per-view. She was the longest first entrant in the Royal Rumble. She main evented the most Raws and SmackDowns as a woman. Like her resume was very long before she ever stepped in 1 minute for AEW. So she's never going to be Tony's creation. Now, has Tony given her? I'm going to be careful with the phrase I use because I don't want people to aggregate this and say we're feeding into the garbage out there. I think where Tony gives her creative control is her match time. I think Mercedes has long hated the WWE format of you can't get more than 15 to 20 minutes max, and on TV you're getting 10. I think Mercedes goes to Tony and says, "Look, you book I win, great. I lose, I don't care. I need 25 minutes. I need 23 minutes. I need 22 minutes. I need to tell my story because I know that whether I win or lose with the time you give me, I'm going to get myself over and I'm going to get the other person over. That
So
is the creative control I think she gets.
no, totally agree with that, and that's not even unique to her. That's the way they tell stories in AEW. So it fits perfectly. I'm gonna go ahead and say something that I'd love for someone to aggregate and just piss off a lot of people. Um, Mercedes displays a skill that nobody else in AEW has. Not a man, not a woman, nobody, just Mercedes. She is the only person in AEW at these big events that can keep heat on a match and or build heat during a match during rest holds. You know, the AEW crowd reacts to like what Osprey, Swerve, and Young Bucks did, where they did like a 45-second sprint, super kick ropes flip, super kick ropes flip. Like that is the way that AEW fans react to matches. Even Omega and Okada had trouble keeping fan interest during their down spots of their match yesterday. The crowd got quiet. Um, they had a more old man version of their match. They have great chemistry, but they didn't. There was more downtime in that match than
Yeah.
the previous four. Mercedes, and it's a very Eddie Guerrero, Ric Flair. Ric Flair really is the one who perfected it. Who they're the bad guy. Everyone wants to see him lose, and they just got like a headlock in, or a sleeper hold in, or an ankle lock in. But they're kind of just looking at the crowd like, you know, this person's nothing, and I'm gonna tweak their arm, and I'm gonna tweak their neck, and all you guys are losers and you're poor anyway. Like she says it all with her face, and it actually builds the match because you watched that whole pay-per-view yesterday, and I will challenge you the amount of times that there were rest holds at all, A, and B, the only time it worked and the crowd stayed invested was when Mercedes did it.
Yeah. I do consider myself an expert in all things Okada Omega. I've watched those matches multiple times, like the New Japan matches. And I will say, of all of their matches, yesterday was by far their worst. Now, okay. If you're four matches or four of the 10 best matches ever, and then you come up with this one and it's 50th all time or 100th, it's like, it's hard. But I will say this about Okada Omega. I think number one, that match should have gone on before Mercedes and Tony. I don't think it should have gone on after. And I did find that there were real lags in that match. And this is not a men's wrestling podcast. But I found myself saying, why was this match put above Tony Mercedes? Because what I would have done if I were Tony Khan is I go Okada Omega, Okada wins. Then you end the night on the super duper high of Toni Storm and Hangman Page. You send the crowd home as happy as you can because Toni Storm won, Hangman Page won, and they're like your two faces of your company from a babyface standpoint. So for
Counterpoint, real
me,
quick.
yeah.
Did you fast forward at all since you were watching after live?
What do you mean?
Did you let it play for the 6 hours or did you fast forward in between matches?
Oh, I will readily admit to you that I read a lot of reviews about the pay-per-view before I watched it, and everybody told me to start at the women's gauntlet or at the
Yeah.
men's gauntlet. Okay, where did Osprey and the Bucks happen? Did they open the show?
No. It went women's gauntlet. No. Did it go? It went Osprey Bucks, women's gauntlet. I might have those backwards. I do know that it was the tag title was before Mercedes. So what I was
Yeah.
going to say was in the moment of how long the show was, I actually loved that Mercedes and Tony went first because the crowd was ready for something that they cared about and they hadn't had all of the energy driven out of them at that point.
I
Um, I
see.
actually think I actually think the middle match between the three was the lull because
Hmm.
if Okada Omega goes first, if they put that same match out there, then you're probably right and it wouldn't have mattered. But if they put a better match out there, then your danger is you get that in
Yeah,
between lull
okay,
spot.
I get it. If Okada and Omega gave me 2017 Tokyo Dome, then honestly, Hangman Page and Mercedes and Tony are cooked at that point.
Right.
But when I watched Okada Omega, I have to say there was a little bit of sadness for me. Omega isn't the same wrestler he was, and he had some life-threatening injuries, so I get it. And Okada works at the speed he wants to work at. Now, back to Tony and Mercedes. I thought that they put on a great match. They did everything they could. And here's the thing that I'm most proud of for us and what we do on this podcast and what we talk about. I don't have a shame in telling people I watch women's wrestling because when I show them the product, there's nothing embarrassing about the product. Okay, so I have maybe told the story before, and I'm only telling it again because I was with this person yesterday. So one of my lifelong friends, he has not watched wrestling since the Attitude Era. So he said to me, I said to him, he said, hey, I was listening to your podcast because I want to support you. Can you give me a match to watch that I'll like? And please don't disappoint me. Like, don't tell me this is like something of a throwback and then it sucks. Like, give me a match that you are almost positive I'll enjoy. I said, I'm watch Bianca Sasha in WrestleMania 37. So I sent him the clip. He watched it and he said, I got to tell you, it was better than I expected. Like, my expectations were okay, maybe it's going to be good, but they knocked it out of the park. Like, to me, they gave me everything I wanted out of a wrestling match. Like, wow, this Bianca person is amazing. She can lift somebody walking stairs. And the other person, Snoop's cousin, she flies around the ring and she's, arrogant and, kind of a Ted DiBiase, Rick Rude way. And he thought it was like a great match. And now he's asking me to send him more Bianca clips because he's in love with Bianca Belair. He's just like, oh my God, like, who is this person? My point is, I don't think I could show Moxley Hangman to that same person and not have him look at me like, are you a moron? What is this you're watching? Like, this is mind numbing violence to me. And that's what I'm proud of with Mercedes specifically, that she just is a great professional wrestler and doesn't have to do anything else. And I even mean this, like, I love EO. Everybody knows I'm probably the biggest EO fan, and she should be in my roster. That being said, EO is a semi-stunt woman, if I'm being honest about this. Like, she's a semi-stunt woman. Because how did EO become EO? Well, she wrestled the match with Penta in Lucha Underground. Well, that is very Moxley Hangman Page-esque, right? Like, she's getting hit over the head with a chair by a man and getting beat up by a man, but she won the match. But she's still like, it's an uncomfortable thing to watch and show somebody. Because if you show somebody a man beating up a woman, they're like, is this what you watch? Like, is this what you call wrestling? So my point is with Mercedes, and I thank her for this, she makes me proud to be a wrestling fan of the genre because all of her matches are just great in the ring. Now, can she have a misstep? Of course, she's not a robot, she's a human. So the Britt Baker match, I thought that was a misstep, but that's because you're going to have missteps in professional wrestling. But mostly when I watch Mercedes wrestle, I love what she says in the ring with her actions as a professional wrestler. So I thank her for that because she doesn't have to do these crazy things to get herself over. So I do appreciate that.
No, it's absolutely true, and it's what we're looking for. And if you go back and listen to our first episode of this podcast, that's what we've been talking about from the beginning. Speaking of, that is the first time, newsflash, everyone, that is the first time Mercedes has lost in the history of this podcast.
Yes,
um,
yes.
she
Yeah.
did lose the three-way match, but she wasn't pinned. And she lost some tag teams, but that was the first time she's been pinned since we started this podcast. The one other thing about Toni Storm, that just for fans out there who are wondering maybe why she won, I know we were complaining about Sasha Banks being over at WrestleMania by 0-3. When she lost her third match at WrestleMania, everyone was like, why the hell has she not won a match at WrestleMania? And then it was 4, and then it was 5, then it was 6. And then she won the 7th match. For the record, Toni Storm was 0-2 at All In.
Oh,
So she's 1-2. She would have been 0-3 if she lost. So that part I kind of see too. And that pivots me to the next point before we talk about the gauntlet. Real quick. Is this a one and done? Do they have a rematch? Do they have several rematches? I think the one area I could see there being rematches is maybe Tony Khan really did want to give Toni that big win. And if they have let me put out there right now. If they have a rematch just for Mercedes to lose again, just keep it. Just keep it. Just keep it. We don't need it. If they have a feud, it should be a back and forth feud. This is not a double down on the loss type of feud to me. You either move on from it or, and you can pretty quickly. You got Forbidden Door coming up. All you got to do is have Mercedes come out and be like, Toni, I want a rematch. And then halfway through the word rematch, music hits and someone's like, nope, you're fighting me at Forbidden Door. And then Athena, goes after Toni and then you separate them. That's very, very simple. But there's also a chance they do need a main event for All Out. I still think this is a main event, true main event level feud, true main event, go on last. What do you think?
well, it's interesting you talk about All Out. If I'm not mistaken, All Out is in this city, right? It's in
Yep.
Toronto. So my niece yesterday, I tweeted this and it was funny. My sister's daughter, she goes, "So are you coming back to Toronto for women's wrestling or for the wrestling show?" And I said, "I might." She's like, "Oh, I want to go with you and I want to see Bianca Belair." And this is where you sadly have to tell the young woman that, Bianca don't go here. As in as in AEW. She just doesn't go there. Bianca Belair, very popular with the people I know in my life. Now, that being said, yes, I think Toni and Mercedes can absolutely main event any AEW show, including what happened yesterday. But looking at the ending now, I see why it didn't main event. You had to main event with the way they did that show. Now, okay, should they have another match? I'm gonna say no, and here's why. One, Toni beat her pretty decisively. There was no chicanery. There was no cheating. It wasn't a fluky small package victory. She storm zeroed her from the turnbuckle and pinned her clean as a sheet. Now, if you want to come back to this feud, I'm okay with that. But for right now, I think they need to go their separate directions because I think Mercedes TBS title I looked at as more prestigious than the women's world title until this feud because I thought Mercedes was having the better matches and the better feuds. So you can now have two pillars of your women's division and have two arcs again, where you have a group of women going after Toni and a group of women going after Mercedes, and you're good. You are
Yeah.
good to go.
I do think it was a clean ending, but it was it took Toni 10 plus minutes longer to beat her than it took her to beat anyone else. So from a storyline perspective, there's no reason why Mercedes wouldn't and shouldn't be able to be like, hey, you know what? Screw that. I'm Mercedes Moné. Give me another shot. But I think it's not. She didn't get cheated, so the answer could still be no or whatever. And that's why I think it's perfect if you have her come out. Mercedes' character should absolutely expect to get another shot and then someone else interrupts her. Now, if you're having the rematch and you're actually doing it, Mercedes shouldn't go to the ring and ask for it. Mercedes should beat the shit out of Toni because she lost her mind because she lost, and she should attack her, and then it would just make sense storyline wise.
I am okay with that. You know what I don't want? And I know this is not a WWE Evolution recap show. You know what I don't want? Babyface champion who has never lost to this other person says, I want to fight you again because I have nothing else to do. which is what I loathed about the whole Io Rhea thing. And I know that match will be great later tonight, but like it just makes me and then when Io loses, which spoiler is my prediction, it's going to be, oh, what a dumb baby face she is. She asked for the match and then she goes and loses. I think if Mercedes loses her mind and goes into that dark space, yeah, you can tell that story. I just I love this match and I love I think they should invest more time in other women. Like I'd like to see Athena Tony. I'd like to see Siri Mercedes. I'd like to see, other matches right now. I think Megan Bain needs a recoat, a re like Megan Bain going after Mercedes would be something. Like to me, I want to see some different stuff, but I agree with you that if Mercedes is going to get the rematch so quickly, it has to be a correct story where Mercedes, like you said, is the delusional heel, asks for the rematch. Tony says no, then like jumps her in the parking lot or does something like that. And I still think at some point Luther has to turn on Toni Storm. And what better person to turn on Toni Storm than Mercedes, who's about money, and Luther gets bought. To me, that's the story. But I don't know,
Yeah.
and I know we're gonna talk about the gauntlet, and I guess we can do that. Isn't Let me ask you this: when you watched the gauntlet match and Athena won, wasn't the first thing you said, "Ah, Mercedes is gonna win the world title now," because Athena, Mercedes too, or did you think that's a surefire way of Tony winning?
Instinctually, I thought it was actually Toni was winning after Athena won, and I'll tell you why. Um, I definitely I don't know what Tony Khan has planned for Mercedes overall as far as the world title goes. I'm pretty certain he wants her to break the TBS title record. If she only has the 1 3 year contract, will she ever win the women's title? It's possible she doesn't. Now, I also think she's signing a second contract, but that's a completely different topic. But my thought was Mercedes, when she does hold the world title, is going to hold it for a little while, maybe not a year, but months for sure. And I don't think she's beating Athena the next time that they wrestle, unless, and someone did throw this out there on X, and I mean, not every idea is a good idea. But someone said, what if Athena wins the world title while she's still ROH champion? Then at some point, World's End or wherever they want to do it, they do an all the belts match with her and Mercedes, and you've got like 9 or 10 freaking belts on the line. I don't know. But here's what I will say. Um, I don't know if they're moving on from Mercedes. I would think Athena's certainly beating Tony. And it's just I don't know how long they generally have these people run around with their contracts. I know Christian Cage, it felt like he carried his around for a little while, but I don't think they run it for a whole year like Money in the Bank, right? So, um, Casino Gauntlet. I thought the women smashed the men. It was a significantly better match, in my opinion. Um, I thought it was the best, most organized women's multi-person match in a really, really long time, right? Like I think the producers, whoever was involved in putting that together, it is difficult. I know you don't love the concept, but
I
it
don't.
was it was coherent. It was more coherent. And this isn't a tribalism thing. This is just a compare. WWE is the only one that has stipulation multi-women matches until recently. Um, I thought it was better than the last Royal Rumble and the last Women's Money in the Bank, and I think the women put some organization to it that I really enjoyed. Some really, really good stuff. A bunch of AEW fans that have been AEW fans since before we were tweeted that you could really see the growth and evolution pun intended, of the division, because Thunder Rosa used to be considered the best worker in the division. And you watch that match, and she had a bunch of people around her that were on, at, or above her level, and it was a lot of good work. And I think they actually did a really good job. I like how they had the tag teams where not both women were in the match, and they had them do heel interference. But I actually think it made the match flow better than trying to do the, you know, our Sky and Julia going to fight each other, and our Penelope and Megan going to fight each other. Ultimately, they just picked the better, the stronger, the wrestler in the tag team that's booked better currently, and had them in it. I thought that was a good detail.
Yeah, I don't love the format of the Gauntlet, men or women. It's a little bit confusing and it's a little bit of erratic. I do prefer the Royal Rumble format, even though I know they don't come out every 2 minutes. It's their discretion. I've actually timed this myself, and it's like, wait, why was that 1 minute and 42 seconds and that was 2 minutes and 13 seconds? Like I know it's not, but it gives me the illusion. Now, with that being said, yes, I thought the women's Gauntlet match was much better than the men's gauntlet match. You want to know why? Because I knew who was going to win the men's gauntlet match 3 weeks ago. That's another big problem. That was
Yeah.
too obvious for me that it was MJF because, again, we don't talk about the men on this show, but like MJF with a contract with the Hurt Business as his security, it makes perfect sense that he's going to get the world title and they're going to have all the gold, right? The Hurt Business or Hurt Syndicate, sorry, is going to have all the gold, which is fine. I actually really like that act. But I didn't know who was going to win the women's gauntlet match. Number one, it was the first one they ever had, so they could have gone a multiple. They could have gone
Well, they had
multiple
one in
ways.
January. Toni won it.
Oh,
Rocker
that's
Toni
right.
won it,
That's
but it
right.
was
That's
on
right.
a
She did.
Dynamite.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you're right. You're right. And that's the one where she was fighting Mariah, and then she faked Mariah and said, "Oh, I was acting." Okay, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. This one, I didn't know who was going to win. I really didn't know who was going to win. I thought it was Athena. Like that would have been the bet I would have placed, but I didn't have any real idea. I was just hoping maybe. Yeah, the women worked very, very hard, and I enjoyed the wrestling. Like I enjoyed the wrestling of the match. I thought it was really, really good. And I think they picked the right person. Willow was so over. Willow is so over. And again, this is why I didn't love the decision of Toni Storm winning because I think the Willow beating Mercedes story is the story for like to me that's next year all in. Willow chased Mercedes and finally breaks the tie. It's 1-1 right now. Willow beating her would have been the perfect story for me. But Willow was super over. Athena was super over. Athena came out like a house of fire, cooked, was on, she did great. It was a great match. I enjoyed it. I thought the women definitely smashed the men. I know there's some message boards out there that are like, oh, they were both the same match. I disagree completely. I think they were completely
Huge.
different matches. And I thought that the men's match was just what it was. Like it was a path for MJF to get the contract. To me, the women, they told a real story. They had real good interactions. I enjoyed the work of all the women. I thought they tried their hardest to put on a really good match and they got time. Now, how much time did because the men got 35 minutes. How much time did the women get? Like 20?
20.
See,
35 was too long, truthfully,
I
but
agree.
20
I
was too
agree.
short,
I,
probably.
I 20 isn't too short if both were 20 to 25. 20 seems short when the men got way more time, but honestly, I think that hurt the men. I think the men's match dragged on, and I think it was a little stale. No,
Right.
to me, Athena Tony, fine. Is that the all out match? Is that the all out match?
I don't know. So if they don't do a rematch with Mercedes, here's what I see. I see Mercedes going on a additionally rejuvenative streak where she's going to win Forbidden Door. She'll keep the Rev Pro title that she defends in a couple weeks. She'll win some TBS matches, And I think that she carries the TBS belt through the fall, and then I think she loses that to Willow.
Okay.
Like, I think if Mercedes goes unbeaten again for another 4 or 5 months, the Willow win will still be closely as meaningful, because there's going to be a real good story lead up to that match. And again, I say it's going to be Willow or Chris is the way I see it with the TBS belt. And the only thing I'm not ready for is I actually think it would be a huge mistake to have Mercedes lose and go directly into this Fall from Grace storyline where she starts, like, if she loses the Rev Pro belt and she loses, like, if we're going to do all that now, I think it's early. Maybe she loses those belts and the TBS belt is last, but then it's like you kind of take, at that point, she's losing.
Yeah, I don't like that story right away. And I don't like it at all now because I feel like then the story to tell now is she just lost that night to a better person, but that doesn't mean she should start losing to everybody because then you almost cheapen Toni Storm's win. Because
Yeah,
Toni
agree.
Storm, right? Like Toni Storm is the one who could beat her. Great, Toni's the world champion. By measurements, the world champion should be that good. Here's what I will say, and we can end on this. I'll tell you another reason why I was not super thrilled with Mercedes losing. And I don't care what anybody says, and I know you're going to disagree with this, and that's okay. I think for once, as a Mercedes Moné Sasha Banks fan, I wanted one night where I felt like my all-time favorite North American women's wrestler, maybe all-time favorite women's wrestler, was stamped as the person, the person. Because in WWE, she was never stamped as the person. She was one of them, but she was never the person. Rhea Ripley is the person. Even though she's been booked terribly since she won at Mania, Io Sky won that match to say she's the person. She beat our two pillars. Mercedes has never gotten that win. Never. She didn't get it in NXT. She didn't get it in WWE. She has not gotten it in AEW. Because right now, you cannot make the case that she is AEW's face of the division. It is Toni Storm. It is timeless Toni Storm. And in WWE, it was never Sasha Banks. She was part of the group, but she wasn't the person. So for me, selfishly, as a fan, it's there's this age-old rap debate, okay? And I'm going into my worlds here, where somebody posted a video and they were like, name the year Jay-Z was the guy as a rapper. And then somebody went through this with me. So I'm going to quickly do it. Somebody's like, well, it wasn't 96, it was Tupac. 97 was Biggie. 98 was DMX. 99, it was still kind of DMX and Eminem came. And then 2000, it was Eminem. 2001, that is his best case, but Eminem was still there. '02, Nas, there's a list, and it's like with Mercedes, she's like number two every single year, but she's never number one. And so I just wanted to see her be the face. And people are going to say, well, Raja, she was during the pandemic. Nobody cares because the pandemic stuff, it's like it didn't even happen now when it comes to wrestling. So that's why I wanted to see her win last night because she has yet to get that career defining stamp of approval win.
Yeah, but if you think, and I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you, but I also, as I think through it, the greatest wrestlers of all time, like if you say to someone, hey, name your Mount Rushmore of the best wrestlers of all time,
Mm-hmm.
often the people on that list were very much not, face of the company. They were more so like the best worker in the company, um,
Okay.
or they had very short runs. Like, for as much, Ric Flair, obviously NWA, but
Mm-hmm.
Bret Hart, not successfully the face of the company. Shawn Michaels really wasn't face of the company for much time at all, if at all. And when he was, they were a clear second act to the other company while he was. So, And then the other part of me that I was thinking, and this is something women's wrestling fans do, that because our time is so limited, we argue over who's number one and who's number two and all that. Will Ospreay still hasn't won the world title, but no
Yep.
one would say Will Ospreay has been disrespected since he went to AEW. He's lost several matches, stretchered out last night. He ain't won the world title. Kenny Omega is not the number one in AEW, right? He's not the
No.
number one. He's not the number two. He's not the number three. Now he's older, but Hangman's the clear number one right now. Swerve is still well booked, and so again, everyone can see the top and go, all these guys are protected. Mercedes is in that group with the women, clearly.
Moxley as well, obviously.
Correct. Moxley as well. So now talk to me again if she signs the other contract and we don't. Maybe Tony wants her to win the big title as a face. Maybe he has a good story for her as a face. I don't know, but I I you know I'm
I agree with you that Tony might have a long-term face plan for her. I only wonder if the crowd will fully open up to her as a face. Maybe I'm going to change my mind because they seem to be coming around. I will say this about, you talked about the Mount Rushmore thing. Hulk Hogan was never my favorite wrestler, right? He was never my favorite wrestler. I was always a Randy Savage guy. But I got 1988, where
right.
Randy Savage was stamped as the guy. Now, was it because Hogan went to shoot a movie? Sure. But the point is, he got the belt and he drew the same amount of money and the same amount of TV ratings as Hogan for a whole year. So I know in my heart, Randy was a top guy. He has the money, he drew it, he got the stamp, he's the guy. Sasha Banks, Mercedes Vernato's favorite wrestler of all time is Eddie Guerrero. And Eddie Guerrero got the stamp when he beat Brock Lesnar. He got the stamp because Brock Lesnar was like, Eddie should go over. And Eddie won at WrestleMania against Kurt Angle. Now, he ended up losing to JBL because his demons got the better of him and he could not maintain the responsibility of being the world champion, and he never was world champion ever again. I would have loved, like, when Bianca won at WrestleMania, she had the moment in the ring with her family and they were hugging her and they were like, yeah. And Rhea Ripley is going to get that moment. And Io got the moment at WrestleMania, right? Io's like, we should have all known Io was winning when they flew her whole 50, they flew 50 members of her family to WrestleMania. Why are they doing that? Well, because she's going to win.
Yeah.
And Bianca and Rhea are like, we wanted Io to win because it's her moment. I want that for Mercedes. She's given so much to the business. I want her to be, for once, the A side, where she wins. And this is where I'm not gonna jump off a cliff the way others have in the timeline about, oh, she could be the choker again. No, I'm not doing that yet. If she keeps losing, then we're gonna have to have a different conversation. But my point is, I just wanted, like, I know it would have pissed off so many internet trolls with the creative control nonsense that she won last night. And I know in that crowd when they cheered for Toni winning, it was more of a sigh of relief as much as it was they loved Toni Storm. Because they just did not want to see her win. Fine. But it would have told me that Tony's like, you're my most prized signing ever. And I'm pushing you, and I don't care what anybody else says. And he didn't do it because I think the character creation of Toni Storm is more important to him than the signing of Mercedes Moné, because it's he didn't make her. He made Toni Storm. And I get that. But to me, that's my only knock about last night, because it's like I knew she had lost before I watched the show. Like, I already knew. But I was like, oh, it'd be good one day, man, for her to win. Like, I'll tell you a story. 2019 Hell in a Cell against Becky Lynch. I didn't get to watch it live because I had to go to an event for work. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go home and watch the WWE Network. I don't want to know the spoilers. But I couldn't resist. I was at this event and I'm like, oh my God, what if she won the title and I missed it against Becky in a cage? I left Becky Lynch when I'm like, Nah, okay. You know, back to her losing every big match. And as a fan, I just wanted to see her win the match. She's won
Yeah.
many matches. She's won many titles, but I wanted to see her win the match. She's never won the WrestleMania match. She never won the NXT. Like everybody's gonna say, oh, she's the only winner of the only four horsewomen match we got on TV. Yes, but that's not the match that set the revolution. It's Brooklyn, and she lost.
Well, the WrestleMania All In piece is real, but if a hater said to me, and I know you're not coming from a position of
No,
hate, you want more as a fan. If a hater said to me, Mercedes isn't the greatest of all time, she was never the top person. My comeback would be that she was clearly the top woman in the business, booking and all, from September 2020 to April 2021, because she beat Bailey twice, once in a Hell in a Cell. She beat Asuka clean, who was the other champion.
yep,
The Mela matches. She was the
Naya.
other the other belt wasn't defended, I don't think, on that Royal Rumble that year, but she had the match against Mela. So yeah, she was the top woman from there to there. Certainly deserves longer,
I
but
I agree. I agree. She was in the Pizza Hut commercial. She was the face of, like, if you drove by the Fox studios in 2020, you saw Roman Reigns and you saw Sasha Banks. To me, that tells me you're the two faces of the company, right? Because if you're doing stuff with Roman Reigns in WWE, you're the face of the company. And I thought that's why I don't hate her blue hair booking until she didn't have the SummerSlam match. Then her booking went off the rails and it was never good again in WWE. But like from when she came back with the blue hair to the WrestleMania stuff, man, I thought she was booked really good because she did cement Bianca as the next one. Again, I know she puts over so many people, and I'm sure it meant the world to Toni Storm that she put Toni Storm. Because to me now, Toni Storm is cemented as an all-timer. Like
yeah.
now, Toni Storm is in a different class. Because if she had lost, you had the match with Mariah, but it was a blood and guts match. Okay. But now Toni Storm had like an all-time singles match against an all-time wrestler. You can't ever take it away from. I mean, Toni Storm has beat Io Sky in the Mae Young Classic final, and she's beaten Mercedes Moné. Like Toni Storm now is a Hall of Famer, and so I get Mercedes loves making her fellow women prop up, and she does
Pulling
that
them up to her level, pulling them up
right.
to her level.
But I just like and the way she lost, I would have almost preferred Toni to like small package her. But Tony beat her decisively, like clean.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think we get some character. If we don't get character development from it, then I will join you guys on the other side and be like, "This is stupid. What are we doing?" But we're gonna get character development. I think she goes on another winning streak, not as long, but I think we've got some good stuff ahead of us. Um,
But I agree with you on this. So I want to make sure we highlight the positive that happened yesterday. AEW's women's division. I'm going to make a comparison for you as I give you my closing thoughts. AEW's women's division now is like what the Detroit Lions have become, which is they haven't won the title yet, but they went from being almost a joke of a franchise to a very, very, very solid, stable, elite level organization that at every level of this football team has an elite leader. Whereas, like with the AEW women, 2, 3 years ago before Mercedes, I just looked at it as, oh, he doesn't even care about women's wrestling. Why do they even have women on the roster? Let him go to WWE because he doesn't care. Now I look at the AEW's women's division as a real player. They have a real writer. They have real stars. They get real time. They have real booking and stories. And to me, I that's the analogy. Like I looked at what your Lions were pre Dan Campbell, pre Brad Holmes, pre Jared Goff. and what they are now, where I'm not saying they're going to win they haven't won the Super Bowl, but they're in the conversation.
Yep.
Whereas the AEW women's division 2, 3 years ago wasn't even discussed. It was like, why do they even have it? Now they're a legitimate threat to the WWE women, to the Stardom women, to the TNA women, to the New Japan stuff. Like they could easily by this time next year be the best women's division in the world. And some people already think it is. I don't. But my point is they have arrived, and we should not lose sight of that. Even though Mercedes, in my opinion, should have won, she didn't. Cool. But they have legitimate players. And I think that's a cool thing for what we do.
100%. Great closing thought. And the only thing I'll add to it is, again, go watch those clips. Gauntlet, Mercedes, Toni. The crowd was in. The crowd was loving, accepting, excited for women's wrestling in a weekend where there's at least 7,000 women's wrestling fans not in Texas because they had to go to Georgia for Evolution instead. So if that doesn't show you the amount of demand that's out there for women's wrestling, having an AEW crowd be deeper with fans of women's wrestling than ever, along with a all women's pay-per-view happening the next day. Are some people crazy enough that they're at both shows? I'm sure, but it's mostly different sets of people, and that just shows why I think we do what we do, and a lot of a couple of other people out there
Mm-hmm.
spotlighting women's wrestling are pushing so hard on it because it is one of the most exciting and biggest growth areas of the business.
Yeah, so as we wrap up, we will have a part 2 to this week's episode. We have guests, possibly plural, at least one confirmed, who's at Evolution, who will be on our show to discuss how the event was live in person from Atlanta, Georgia. I want to shout out our good friend of the pod who's been on the pod before, Chrissy, repping the balance sheet merchandise
Yes.
with a picture of the biggest women's wrestling star in the world and my number one draft pick, Rhea Ripley. Also,
I thought you were going to say Nikki Bella, the biggest. I
well,
mean,
yes, maybe historically. Also, but she didn't have the balance sheet shirt on with Nikki.
she did.
Did she?
It's Bailey and Naomi is
Oh,
today,
that's
and she
right.
did
But
Nikki
she also
Rhea.
had one with my U.S. women's wrestling champion who can't even make the card for Evolution, Julia. She
In
also
gear
had
for her meet and greet.
in gear for her meet and greet. So shout out to Chrissy for repping the Balance shirt merchandise, which you can get. The link will be posted in the YouTube page. It's in multiple colors. So thank you for anybody who supports us. Chrissy, you're awesome. And we're excited to hear about Evolution Live. I think the women are going to have a killer night. And I think Mercedes and Toni Storm should get the lion's share of the credit for that. And I think the Gauntlet match, because now they have set the bar. Because remember, the last time Mercedes had a great match, which was against Kanji, that morning, what happened the next night or the next set of hours? The women's three-way came. And I hope Rhea Io below Toni and Mercedes out of the water. Why? Because that means we get classics in both companies, and that's great for our business. Now, I don't think they will. I'm going to be honest here. I love Rhea. I love Io. I'd be hard pressed to think if they could top Mercedes Toni, but that's a challenge to you guys. Go out and do it.
Yep. Excited to talk about it. The For anyone who thinks we were overly harsh about Evolution, I got some comments that they didn't love the women's de-evolution title. That was pointed at management. Let's be super,
Yeah.
super clear. That was pointed at management. Management sucks in this case.
Yeah.
The women are going to kill it tonight.
I just thought that what we were trying to point out is with such a talented group of women that the WWE have, and they have a lot of talent on that roster. I mean, they have so much talent that they had a poster without their number one merchandise seller currently in Stephanie Vacor, and you hardly even realize she wasn't there because it's like, oh my God, we have so much talent. and they get Nikki Bella and Trish Stratus back as well. They are loaded, but management did them no favors in how they built up the women. Now, we'll end on this. I will give Triple H his credit here. What he did with Bianca, Naomi, and Jade last night on Saturday's main event was phenomenal. That was a great piece of business to bring Bianca back, which was Naomi jumped her as she was taking her, she was waving to the crowd, and they were fighting and beating the crap out of each other. And he's like, I can't deal with it. Here's your referee. And it was Bianca. And the look in Jade and Naomi's eyes, like, oh, whose side is she on? It's that old, Bobby Heenan when Hulk Hogan ran to the ring for the NWO. But I think that's awesome to have Bianca Belair on Evolution. It wouldn't have felt like Evolution without Bianca Belair on it. So to me, that's great. We're going to get a great night of women's wrestling. I think we're going to get some great matches. And I'm excited to hear what our correspondents say from being in the building.
Yep. All right.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.